Have you ever held on to a task at work, like maybe a really complex report or a tricky client email, because you just told yourself, honestly, it's just faster if I do it myself?
Oh, absolutely. Or the complete opposite, right? Where you hand a project off to someone on your team, you breathe this huge sigh of relief, and
Okay.
then,
Check back a week later, and it's an absolute frustrating disaster.
yes, exactly. I mean, it's a pretty universal experience. We all know we're supposed to delegate. It's Management 101.
Right.
But somehow the actual practice of it feels like, well, walking through a minefield. You either end up doing everything yourself and completely burning out, or you hand it off and spend your whole weekend fixing someone else's mistakes.
Yeah, that is the exact tension we're tackling in today's deep dive.
Hmm.
We are going to master the true science of delegation.
Which is much needed.
It really is. We're moving far past that vague, generic advice of, just trust your team. Yeah. And we're getting into a highly precise step-by-step framework. And our source material today is really fascinating because of where it comes from.
Very unexpected source.
Right. It is an internal supervisory skills development training module from Fubaya Mining.
And that context is incredibly important here. When we talk about a massive mining operation, we aren't just talking about a missed deadline on a spreadsheet.
No.
We're talking about really high-stakes environments, heavy machinery, strict safety protocols.
Yeah, millions of dollars on the line.
Exactly, millions of dollars. In that world, delegation failures can lead to literal disasters. So their training can't just be motivational fluff. It has to be almost a mathematical formula for assessing human capability.
Which is brilliant for us because whether you are a corporate manager in a high-rise, a team lead on a construction site, or honestly just someone trying to organize a neighborhood volunteer group, human behavior works the exact same way.
It really does.
So the goal of this deep dive is to teach you how to analyze someone's readiness for a specific task and then perfectly adapt your leadership style to match. If we get this right, the days of micromanaging or accidentally abandoning your team are completely over.
But to get there, we need to completely redefine what delegation actually is. Because the training manual starts with this foundational concept that breaks the process down into 3 specific pillars.
Right. Authority, responsibility, and accountability.
Yes. And understanding the difference between these 3 is basically the entire ballgame.
So let's unpack those. The first 2 seem pretty straightforward, I think. You have authority, which the manual defines as the right to decide what is to be done.
Right. You're handing over the power to make choices.
Exactly. And then you have responsibility, which is the obligation to actually complete the assigned task. The employee is taking on the burden of the physical or mental work.
But here is where leaders usually stumble. They hand over the authority to make decisions.
Okay.
And they hand over the responsibility to do the work, and they just assume they are completely clean of the project.
Like they wash their hands of it.
Right. But the third pillar is accountability, which means being answerable for the final outcome. And the golden rule of this entire framework is that you can give away authority and responsibility, but you absolutely cannot delegate accountability.
Wow. Okay, that is a terrifying thought if you're a manager. You give away the power to do the job, but you keep the ownership of the final results.
Yeah.
So if the project fails, you can't just point at your employee and say, well, they messed it up.
You can't, because the ultimate accountability rests entirely on your shoulders.
Which is heavy.
It is. But recognizing that reality is what forces a leader to actually manage the delegation process, it stops you from just tossing a project over the fence and, hoping for the best.
Because you're still on the hook.
Exactly. Because you are on the hook, you are required to follow a structured approach. The framework suggests 3 basic steps to protect yourself and your team. Analyze, assign, and monitor.
So analyze what needs to be delegated, assign it properly through a clear briefing, and monitor the progress to ensure it meets the standard.
You got it.
But let's just pause on that first step, analyze. If I am terrified that I'm still accountable for the result, my instinct is to just hold on to everything. So what kinds of tasks are actually safe to hand off?
Well, the framework doesn't advocate for dumping your entire plate onto your team. It specifically identifies 3 categories of tasks that are prime for delegation. The first is basically the low-hanging fruit routine or recurring tasks.
Like the weekly metrics poll.
Exactly. The basic data entry or preliminary schedule drafting. If it's a simple repeating job, hand it over. The primary goal here is simply to free up your own cognitive load so you can focus on higher-level strategy.
Okay, routine tasks make total sense. But the second category they list is skill-building tasks. Now, if I'm on the hook for the outcome, Handing off a complex skill-building task to someone who hasn't fully mastered it yet, that feels incredibly risky.
It is a calculated risk.
Right. What if they make a mistake while learning on a really critical project?
It's a risk, but a necessary one for team growth. The training uses a great mantra for this. Teach, strengthen, motivate.
I love that.
Yeah, if you want a resilient team, you have to give them valuable learning experiences, not just the busy work. When you delegate a complex piece of work, you are explicitly showing that you trust their potential.
Which has to feel good for the employee.
Oh, it's a massive motivator. That demonstration of confidence changes how they work. You manage the risk through how closely you monitor them, which we'll get into shortly, but you just cannot avoid delegating growth opportunities.
That makes a lot of sense. It's an investment in their future capacity.
Mm.
And then there's the third category, which honestly is entirely about checking your ego at the door.
Yes, my favorite one.
You should delegate tasks that others can do better than you. The manual actually has this refreshing moment of honesty where it just says, we are not perfect.
Go figure.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes your team members have better specific technical skills, or honestly, they might just enjoy that type of grueling, detailed work way more than you do.
It is such a classic leadership trap to believe that because you're in charge, you must be the best at every single function of the team.
Like you have to be the smartest person in the room.
Exactly. But letting the spreadsheet wizard handle the complex financial modeling, even if you technically know how to do it yourself, that's just good resource management.
So, assuming we've picked the perfect task from one of those three categories, we hand it off. Why does it still fail? Because we've all done this right. Pick the right task, given it to a generally smart person, and it still completely blows up.
It fails because leaders often fixate entirely on the task itself, and they completely ignore a concept the training calls task capability.
Task capability.
Right. We look at the complexity of the spreadsheet, but we don't properly evaluate the current state of the human being who is about to build it.
Okay, let's break that down. The framework splits task capability into two distinct halves that you have to evaluate: ability and willingness. Let's look at ability first. That is a combination of their knowledge, their skill, and their experience.
Yep.
Like, do they actually understand what the work entails? Can they execute it with speed and accuracy? Have they successfully performed similar tasks in the past?
And then the second half is willingness. Now, this isn't just about whether they're in a good mood that day or if they're, a compliant employee.
Right.
The framework defines willingness as a specific mixture of confidence, commitment, and motivation. Do they have the self-belief to tackle this specific work? Are they genuinely dedicated to seeing it through to a high standard?
What I found really compelling in the material is how these two halves interact with each other. Because we tend to think of ability and willingness as completely separate traits.
We do.
Like someone is either highly skilled or they aren't. Someone is either a go-getter or they're lazy. But the text argues they feed into each other heavily. A low degree of ability can actively drain someone's motivation.
The psychology behind that is fascinating. Think about it. If you are handed a task and you deep down know you lack the skills to do it, you immediately become afraid of failing. You feel inadequate.
Sure.
And that fear and insecurity completely tank your willingness to even start. You procrastinate. You second-guess yourself.
And to a manager who isn't paying attention, you just look unmotivated or lazy.
Exactly. When in reality, your lack of ability has killed your confidence.
Which means, as a leader, if you misdiagnose the problem, if you think they're just being lazy when they're actually scared because they literally don't know how to do it, your reaction is going to make things infinitely worse.
Oh, absolutely. You have to correctly map out exactly where the employee is on both the ability and the willingness scales.
And this is where the training module introduces its core diagnostic tool, right? The 4 stages of readiness, or the R scale.
Yeah.
It gives us a way to categorize how ability and willingness combine in real-world scenarios.
Yes.
To make this tangible, the training uses a brilliant analogy learning to drive a car. There are 4 levels, R1 through R4. So let's walk through the evolution of a driver. Imagine R1. The manual calls this unable and insecure. Think about someone sitting behind the wheel of a car for the very first time. They have zero knowledge of how the pedals or gears work. They lack the skills, and precisely because they lack the skills, they have absolutely zero confidence.
They're terrified.
Right, they're white-knuckling the steering wheel, terrified of pulling into traffic and crashing.
Then, after some instruction, you progress to R2. This is unedible but confident. This person has taken a few lessons in an empty parking lot. They have some basic foundational knowledge, but they still need a ton of practice.
So they aren't ready for the highway yet?
Not at all. However, because they've driven a little bit without crashing, they have this burst of confidence. They're eager. They are willing to try.
Got it. And next is R3, which the text calls able but insecure. This is a really tricky stage. This driver actually has the ability to drive the car. They know the rules of the road. They can parallel park. They know how the machine works. But they still lack the confidence to do it entirely on their own. They aren't sure how they'll react if something unexpected happens, like a sudden downpour or a weird noise from the engine. They have the skill, but they desperately want the instructor sitting in the passenger seat just in case.
Yes. And finally, you reach R4. Able and confident. This is the seasoned everyday driver. They have the technical ability, and they have the complete self-belief to just get in the car, turn on the radio, and go.
They don't need anyone.
Right. They don't need an instructor beside them. They don't need turn-by-turn directions. They operate completely independently.
It is a perfect way to visualize the progression.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a manager, my goal is obviously to get everyone on my team to that R4 level where they are driving independently.
Yeah.
And once they're at R4, my job is done, right? I can just hand them anything.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But here is the major curveball this training throws at us, and I think it fundamentally changes how you view your team. Task capability is not constant. It is entirely dependent on the specific task. Let's stick with the driving analogy. What happens if you take that R4 employee, the person who is an expert, highly confident driver of a standard sedan, and you suddenly toss them the keys to an 18-wheeler commercial truck?
Oh, wow. Okay. Their readiness completely evaporates.
Exactly. Now, they don't drop all the way back to R1 because they aren't totally terrified. They understand the basic rules of the road and traffic flow.
Sure.
But their capability instantly drops to R2. Unable, but confident. They have general driving confidence. They are probably willing to give it a shot, but they absolutely lack the specific technical skills required to operate a massive, complex machine with air brakes and massive blind spots.
You cannot treat a team member as a universal, across-the-board R4 just because they're brilliant at their current everyday job.
Precisely.
The very second you hand them a new type of task, their readiness stage resets. The manual actually illustrates this with some heavy industrial examples from Fubaya mining, like an experienced nickel refinery operator moving to a copper-gold processing plant.
And we can easily translate that to a standard office environment. An R2 situation, unemployable but confident, happens constantly when you promote your best people.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine taking your absolute top-performing sales representative and suddenly making them the manager of the sales team.
Right.
They have massive general workplace confidence, and they're highly motivated by the promotion. But they are technically unable to do the specific new tasks of management like performance reviews, budgeting, conflict resolution without guidance.
And if you treat them like an R4 manager just because they were an R4 salesperson, they will fail.
Completely.
That makes so much sense. And then there's the R3 example, able but insecure.
Yeah.
This is the stage that I think secretly drives managers the craziest.
Oh, without a doubt.
The manual describes a supervisor who knows exactly how to write the complex month-end production report. Like, they've helped the superintendent compile it for the last 6 months. They possess the complete technical ability.
Yeah.
But they are utterly terrified to submit it to upper management without their boss reviewing every single line first.
Because the R3 employee is paralyzed by their own lack of confidence, not a lack of skill. They hyper-focus on potential problems. They're constantly seeking reinforcement, asking, am I doing this right? Does this look okay to you?
Even though they already know it.
Right. They have the ability to hit send, but their willingness is the barrier.
So we have this diagnostic tool. We can look at a team member and say, okay, for this specific spreadsheet, they are an R1 or an R3. But how do we actually fix it? How do we move them to R4 independence? Because if you manage an R1 beginner the exact same way you manage an R3 veteran, you're going to create a disaster.
You are. The framework argues that leaders have essentially a control panel with two main dials, directive behavior and supportive behavior.
Okay, 2 dials.
Directive behavior is entirely about the task. It's one-way communication telling the employee exactly what, when, where, and how to do the job. It is purely instructional.
Got it.
Supportive behavior, on the other hand, is about the relationship. It's two-way communication providing emotional support, active listening, encouragement, and facilitating problem solving.
So let's apply those dials to the specific readiness stages. Imagine you have an R1 employee, the person who is unable and insecure. They're white-knuckling the steering wheel. The manual calls the required leadership style for this phase telling.
Right.
You need to crank the directive behavior dial all the way up and, surprisingly, keep the supportive behavior dial relatively low.
Which often sounds counterintuitive to modern managers. We are so trained to think that if someone is insecure and scared, they need a ton of emotional support.
Right, like they need a hug and an inspiring speech.
Exactly. But the training clarifies exactly why that fails. You have to remember why they're insecure. They are terrified because they literally lack the technical ability to do the job.
Oh.
So you have to fix the ability deficit first. A pep talk won't help if they don't know which button to push. You must act strictly as an instructor.
That makes a lot of sense.
You give highly specific instructions. You break the complex task down into tiny, manageable stages. You tell them, do step 1, then stop and come show me. You do not overwhelm them with the big picture yet.
And while you do provide praise, you provide it specifically for the successful completion of each instructional step. Building their competence is what will eventually build their confidence.
And as they build that competence, they graduate to R2. Unable, but confident. They have little experience under their belt and they're eager to do more. This requires shifting to the explaining or selling leadership style.
Okay.
Now, you keep the directive dial high, but you also crank the supportive dial high. They still desperately need the what and how instructions because they aren't fully competent, but you transition from one-way dictation to a two-way dialogue.
So you start explaining the why behind the task. You actively ask them questions to check their comprehension. You want them to come back and ask you to re-explain things. You're feeding their growing enthusiasm with high support while still holding their hand very tightly on the technical execution.
Perfect. And then we reach that frustrating R3 employee, able but insecure. The supervisor who refuses to submit the month-end report without you double-checking it. The required leadership style here is called participating. This requires turning the directive dial all the way down to low while keeping the supportive dial high.
And I really love this part of the framework because it clarifies a huge misconception. Since the R3 employee already possesses the technical knowledge of how to do the task, the manual explicitly warns managers, stop giving them instructions.
Yes.
There is zero need to provide high amounts of what, how, and where. If you keep telling an R3 exactly how to do their job step by step, you're going to insult them and further destroy their confidence.
You have to completely shift your role from being an instructor to being a facilitator. You transition to joint decision-making. You need to pull them into the process so they feel comfortable taking ownership of the knowledge they already have.
To be clear, participating doesn't mean abandoning them or just saying, figure it out. It's about how you communicate. The manual actually gives the exact phrasing you should use.
Which is great.
Instead of telling them what to do, you sit down and ask, what are your ideas on how we should get this completed? Or how do you think we should go about tackling this problem?
You are forcing them to vocalize the plan that is already sitting in their head. You act as a sounding board to validate their expertise, not a teacher.
And if we look at the entire framework, the ultimate danger here is the mismatch. Think about the catastrophic results of using the wrong style. If you use a highly directive telling style on an R3 employee who already knows the job perfectly well, you will completely demotivate them.
Right, you'll make them feel micromanaged, untrusted, and undervalued.
Conversely, if you try to use a participating style on an R1 employee, if you sit down with someone who's never seen the software before and ask, so how do you think we should build this database? You're going to terrify them.
Absolutely. It feels supportive to ask for their input, but to them, it feels like you are abandoning them without a map. It all comes down to diagnosing the readiness stage correctly for the specific task at hand.
Delegation isn't a single action. It's a constant recalibration.
Precisely. You have to continually assess. Am I looking at an ability problem or am I looking at a willingness problem? And then you adjust your dials of directive instruction and supportive facilitation accordingly.
Let's pull all of this together because this is a framework you can start applying to your own to-do list right now. First, remember the golden rule of accountability. You can delegate the authority to make decisions and the responsibility to do the work, but you guard your accountability. You own the final result, which is why you must manage the process.
Yep.
Second, before you hand a task off, stop and assess the human being. Is the barrier their ability, their technical knowledge and skills, or is it their willingness, their confidence and motivation? Third, map them onto the R scale for that specific task. Are they a terrified R1, an eager but unskilled R2, or a capable but hesitant R3?
And finally, match your leadership style to that stage. Be highly directive and instructional with the beginners and highly supportive but totally hands-off with the instruction for the insecure veterans.
It's a really powerful system.
It is. And it brings up a final thought I really want you to mull over as you look at the people you manage or work with. Think deeply about that R3 stage.
Right.
If you have a team member who seems permanently stuck there, someone who is always insecure, always asking you to double-check their work, always hesitant to make a final decision without your blessing, is it possible that their lack of confidence isn't their fault? Is it possible that your leadership style is the actual bottleneck?
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Ask yourself, are you over-directing them? Are you acting as a permanent safety net because it makes you feel more comfortable about your own accountability?
Because you're still on the hook.
Right. Because if you are always there to check their work and fix their minor mistakes before submission, that safety net is secretly acting as a cage.
Wow.
By constantly verifying their work, you are reinforcing the idea that they can't do it alone, keeping them from ever reaching R4 independence.
You might genuinely think you are just being a helpful, supportive boss, but your constant availability is actively preventing them from growing.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the science of delegation. We highly encourage you to take these frameworks, look closely at your own to-do list, evaluate the real readiness of your team, and put these tools to the test in your own life. We'll catch you on the next one.